Analytics is one of those things that us founders are super intimidated by. It doesn't matter what tool you use, whether it's Google Analytics, Mixpanel, Amplitude, all of these tools can seem very overwhelming. In addition to that, oftentimes we're not even sure what metrics are most important for us to track. And when we finally start tracking all of these metrics, we seem to get decision fatigue when we're presented with all of this data. And that's why I've arranged this exclusive workshop with Merveen Pandoo. Having spent over 6 years at Mixpanel, he's one of their leading experts globally. By now, he's helped over 100 companies set up their analytics internally. There hasn't been a Mixpanel question that he's not seen before. But what makes him unique is that unlike a lot of us founders, he's actually super passionate about data and helping businesses make decisions based on product analytics. Now, the original workshop was over 2 hours long, so we've broken it down into a 5-part video series where we dive into a real use case to set up end-to-end analytics on our Framer site for our productivity app startup, Blitzit. It's a very simple funnel. Users come via organic channels and paid ads. They start at the Framer site where we first capture their emails. We then push them to a download page to download the app. These users then proceed to install the app on their desktop and start using it. So some of the key metrics that we'd love to track are conversion events like app downloads and purchases. In addition to this, website page views, button clicks, and demographics is going to give us super valuable insights to optimize our marketing campaigns. Now, in this series, we start with video 1, which is this video, the tracking plan. This is where we plan what are the key metrics that we want to track across the entire funnel. In video 2, we show you how to install the Mixpanel SDK, which is the technical implementation of Mixpanel on the Framer site within the custom code section. And in video 3, we have a dedicated troubleshooting session. We took significant time troubleshooting and fixing everything during the process to get it all working. In video 4, we cover tracking button clicks and identity management. This is where we use a custom code override to track button clicks and to set up our email capture as a user identifier on Mixpanel. This session also had some troubleshooting time. And finally, in video 5, Merveen gives us a complete Mixpanel walkthrough. This is where we figure out how to make most of the data by analyzing the events and setting up reports and boards. Now, just before we get started, if you're new to this channel, my name's Omar Farouk, designer turned startup founder. And in this channel, I share my journey building tech startups and trying my best to achieve breakthrough growth. So if you're interested in all of this stuff, then smash that subscribe button. I'll really appreciate it. All right, so now let's jump into video 1, the tracking plan.
All right, guys, we got our live session rolling. Super excited. We're going to be diving into setting up analytics for our Blitzit Framer website. And we've got Merveen Pandoo with us today to actually guide us through this process. It'd be great to hear a little bit about your background and how you got into analytics in the first place.
Thanks, Omar. Hey, everyone. My name is Merveen, or Merv for short. I'm based in London, originally from Mauritius. I've been at Mixpanel now for the last 6.5 years. I started my journey at Mixpanel as part of the support team, where I really understood how to troubleshoot issues and got to know the product really well. From support, I then became a solutions architect, helping clients with the most technical challenges they had with Mixpanel. Followed after being a solutions architect, I became a customer success architect at Mixpanel, and my role essentially is to help clients get value out of the product. So anything to do with understanding what to track, thinking about your metrics, implementing the tool, and also once you have the data, getting value out of the tool, and just really understanding how to maximize your use of Mixpanel.
Really exciting. From my journey so far as a software founder, I've struggled so much with analytics, and I think this is a team-wide issue in both our companies, Glorify and Blitzit. And because Blitzit is an early startup, we'd love to kind of nail this very early on. So we're really grateful and excited for you to be here to kind of guide us through this process. We've already implemented the analytics with Mixpanel with your advice, of course, in our app level so far. We do have our lead engineer, Mandrew, sitting on standby if we need him to kind of pull his brain. But guys, this session is going to be more sort of like a workshop style session where we're going to use Blitzit as a real use case and figure out the website analytics on our Framer site. And hopefully we can tie all that data neatly into what's happening in our application. And we've got Merveen, of course, here to guide us through that entire process. So Merveen, really excited. Over to you in terms of the first piece.
Absolutely. Thanks, Omar. Just for general context, this is not something we've done before. We have not practiced it. So this is the first time that we'll implement Mixpanel on Blitzit. And Omar, just to confirm as well, you've never implemented Mixpanel before.
Yeah.
And the purpose of this...
I've never implemented it myself. I've poked around, of course, and so I've had a little bit of that. But this is the first time I'm going to be guided through for like an end-to-end setup, 100%. Yeah.
And yeah, the purpose of the session today is to show you how easy it is to implement a tool like Mixpanel, and how much value you can get with product analytics when thinking about user behavior within your application, when thinking about understanding which sources are working the best based on your marketing campaigns and so on. But we'll go into those use cases in more detail shortly.
Great. Okay, so we'll be following Merv, and Merv will sort of guide us through his framework.
To get started, I created a section for the analytics framework. The reason why I did that is because before you start thinking about which events that you want to track, you start thinking about how to track those events, it's important to take a step back and understand what are the key metrics that you would like to measure as a business. What are the key metrics that's important for you to be able to make decisions, to improve the product, to understand user behavior. We've shortlisted 4 different metrics, starting with the focus metric. So Omar and I discussed this previously, and I understand that the core, essentially, metric the business cares about is the number of weekly app downloads. So starting with this as a focus metric, we then broke this down into 3 level 1 metrics, essentially, as we call them: reach, activation, and engagement. And in terms of reach, your reach metric is essentially, how many users have accessed the platform, how many users can you reach, essentially. And we've shortlisted a few of the metrics here. So we want to understand unique users in terms of daily active users, weekly active users, monthly active users. We also want to look at page views, understand UTM sources, UTM campaigns, and attribution sources of users who arrive onto the page. Next, we'll focus on activation, so understand the user journey from the moment they view a page all the way through them doing our key moment, which is to download the app. And finally, we want to understand our engagement metrics, so how users interact with the blogs that we have on the Blitzit website. Omar, is there anything that you'd like to add there in terms of the metrics that we want to measure?
You definitely nailed it on the head, Merveen. One thing I just want to clarify for our audience is just a couple of abbreviations for those people who are not familiar, in case. Of course, we'd assume a lot of you guys already know this stuff, but for those of you guys who are just early coming into SaaS growth, DAUs, your daily active users, WAUs, weekly active users, MAUs, monthly active users, and UTM. Merveen, do you want to explain UTM source and campaign very quickly, and what is the attribution source too? I'm pretty sure everyone understands page views. It's a standard metric, but those 3 pieces?
Yeah, absolutely. When creating a marketing campaign, within the link for that campaign, you would have several parameters called UTM parameters. And this is how you can define or measure which campaign a user is coming from. So once you have those parameters in the link, you would share that link, based on your marketing campaign. A user would click on the link and arrive onto the web page. Once the user lands onto the web page, the home page, or whichever page the link takes them to, the Mixpanel SDK would automatically detect those UTM parameters within the URL and would then set those as properties within your event, so that you can then connect user behavior with which source and which campaign and so on that the user saw before arriving onto that landing page which you linked to in that marketing campaign.
Great. So in essence, we can use UTMs to sort of track campaigns, external campaigns, whether it's sort of paid media or organic traffic coming through to the website, right?
Absolutely.
Whichever external link, essentially. That's, if you were to put it in a nutshell, would this be that would be the only use case, is any external link?
Absolutely. So any external links that would take the user to your webpage, and those links, can be shared anywhere on social media or whichever, where you're running your campaign. But as the UTM parameters exist within the URL, the Mixpanel SDK would detect those the moment the user lands into that page.
And if we get our tracking right, the great thing about this is that we'll understand which are sort of our winners in terms of campaigns, whether it's social media or a specific blog article, or we've had like a partnership with a third-party website.
Absolutely. Within Mixpanel, you can build a funnel to understand the full user journey from the first page that they viewed all the way to this conversion event. In our case, it's the fact or the action of downloading the app. And with UTM parameters or the UTM sources or campaigns, we can then break down the funnel into which campaign has performed the best. And we can then measure campaigns against each other to understand which one leads to the best conversion.
This is super exciting. In fact, this is gold for SaaS marketers and founders. Like it's like if you don't have this in your business, then you're kind of blind. So I'm really excited. Take us from here, Merveen. You can go ahead.
Great. So the next step is once we've identified the key metrics that we want to measure. And again, I would recommend to start small. Think about just your top level metrics as a starting point so that things do not get too complex too quickly. Just because once you have identified the key metrics for the business, you can then drill down into which events do you need to track to be able to essentially capture those metrics within Mixpanel. I see quite a lot that where people implement Mixpanel and they start tracking everything without really having that structure. And then what easily can happen is that you have a bunch of events within your project. You don't really understand why they were tracked. What's the purpose of those events? The project really gets messy. Then it becomes difficult to understand, your data, or even just to trust the data as, you're not sure why those events were tracked and how they have been tracked. So what I did here is I captured different pages of the Blitzit website so that we can then identify what are the different events that we can now track. So starting with the homepage, once you implement the Mixpanel SDK, one of the benefits of the SDK is that you do not need to programmatically track a page view. The SDK would track the page view by itself. The moment the user lands on that page, you will have an event that's called page view. Within that event, the SDK would automatically track the page title, which will tell you, what page the user is on, and that will happen on every single page that the user essentially opens and lands on. Next, we can start tracking our buttons within each page. So this image here is for the homepage, and we've identified a couple of buttons. The first one is Try Blitzit Now, or the second one as well is Try Blitzit Now, but they're located at two different areas of the web page. So in order to track a button, you would need to, first of all, in terms of the tracking plan, what we want to do with this button, the moment the user clicks on that button, we want to track that as an event. An event is essentially an action that a user does on the web page that sends an event to Mixpanel. And within that event, you can have additional details or attributes of that event. We call those properties. For this example here, the event that we want to track is Try Blitzit Now clicked. And in terms of the property, we want to track the button name. Within Framer, the code that we'll share shortly allows you to essentially capture the text within the button. And this is the text that we will use to set as button name. Similarly, with the button located in the navigation bar, we will also want to try Blitzit Now clicked, and there we want to add a page section that will tell us that this button essentially exists in the navigation bar. So we sort of know where did the user click in order to essentially move on to the next page. We also have a limited discount section button here that the user can click on. We also want to track this so that we understand, if this was valuable for the user, and there we want to track the button name and discount code. The next section is focusing on the navigation bar. So here are the different events that we can track as part of the navigation bar. So those would be essentially the user clicking on one of those buttons. That would then trigger an event to Mixpanel. For example, if the user clicks on the Help Center, this would trigger Help Center clicked. And as properties, we want to track button name and page section. So this essentially more or less gives you an overview of how to think about a tracking plan. So first of all, you would understand, what are the different actions the user can do on that page. Knowing that page view will automatically be tracked by Mixpanel, but just understanding page view really limits the analysis that you can do. However, knowing that the user click on specific buttons, then this allows you to really drill down into, which buttons are leading to the next step, which buttons are being clicked the most, which buttons maybe are not being clicked on, just to understand, the user experience once they land onto the website.
Makes sense. I have one question, Mev, if possible. So like with the event properties, you mentioned, you got a button name. Why page section, and what is that exactly? What does that property mean?
Sure. Essentially, the thought process behind it is that the user could essentially, let's say, click on a blog in different sections of the website. Now, we would understand the moment the user lands onto the blog page, we have a page view event. Then from there, we want also to understand what was the last page, or where did the user click to land onto that blog page viewed event. And the fact that we've got multiple areas where the user essentially can click on blog, we want to have a way to identify which button, but also from which section did the user click to land onto the blog page. And that's why we added a section property, so that we can then track each event from a specific section with that section property, so we know which actions are being done from the nav bar, which actions are being done from the homepage, which actions are being done from the sidebar.
So button name in the case of Help Center as an example would be Help Center. We could name it Help Center, right? Or Help Center link or Help Center button. Would that be okay? Would that make sense or not?
We generally recommend to track the action. So here the user is doing a click, and the convention that we're following here is Help Center clicked. So we know the user clicked on the Help Center button.
Right.
That being said,
the event properties would be then Help Center clicked instead of, so the button name definition of this specific use case for Help Center would be Help Center clicked. Is that what you're saying?
So the action or the event name would be Help Center clicked. And then within that, the additional details that we want to track is the name of the button, which will be Help Center, and the page section, which will be sidebar, navbar, or home, essentially.
Right. So you got event name, which is Help Center clicked, and then the event properties, the button name would be like Help Center button. And then can you give me an example of page section? How would that look like as a property in this case for like Help Center?
So there, when we track button name, we're capturing the nav button text. Essentially, it's the text within the button. And when we track page section, we're programmatically specifying where this event is coming from. So when we do our tracking, let's say we're tracking events which can be tracked on the sidebar. What we want to do there is with each event, we want to have page section as sidebar. So page section would be the property key, and sidebar would be the property value. So then you would have, let's say, blog clicked, Help Center clicked, roadmap clicked. And then within that, you also have your page section, which would be sidebar. Similarly, with the navigation bar, it's the same event, which would lead them to maybe, if it's a blog, it would lead them to the blog page, but then we would know that blog was clicked on the nav bar instead of the sidebar.
Makes sense. And I think all of this is going to come together when we actually see it in action in Mixpanel, right?
Absolutely.
Perfect. I'll let you continue on.
Thank you. And so we've tried to map out the different web pages. And on each web page, we've also mapped out the different events that we want to track. Within those events, the properties that we want to track. For example, there we have the section where the user can download the app, and the event name we're defining is download Mac OS app, as the user would click on the download Mac OS button. As a property, we want to track button name, which would also be download Mac OS, and page section, which we can then define, as being from the sidebar. Similarly with app downloaded, we have the app downloaded event, and depending on the operating system, we would then have operating system as a property, which would then tell us, what is the operating system of that user when they're downloading the app, essentially. This would be an example of the code that would track a button. So within that code, there are two things that we need to point out. One is, well, the mixpanel.track code. Essentially, this is what tracks the event. And within that, we would specify the event name, as well as the properties that we want to track with that event. And when we think about properties, we have the property key and the property value. In general, the property key is something that you define in the track code, and the property value is captured from the web page itself. So to give an example, here we're tracking the event's name as navbar dash followed by the nav button text. So what this bit of code will do is grab essentially the text that you've set on the button and have that as part of your event's name. And similarly, we're also tracking button name as nav button text. It would just capture the same value and have that as a property within that event. So your event's name can give you an indication of, the action the user did, where did they do that action, and the property would just give you more details on that particular action. Okay, so just to recap, with the Mixpanel implementation, we started with building an analytics framework, understanding what are the metrics that we care about as a business, our focus metric, reach, activation, and engagement metrics. There's a lot of documentation about, thinking about your metrics, and that's something that we can share as well. Mixpanel has published a lot of guides on how to really drill into your metrics, which we can share. But from the point where you have your metrics and you understand what the business cares about, this is when you start thinking about the core events that you want to capture in order to be able to essentially answer those questions within Mixpanel. And once you have your tracking plan with your list of events, you then go into the actual implementation where you would install the SDK and implement the code. So that's what we'll go on to next.